Today we're looking at Benedict Arnold. Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Please don't forget to subscribe and take a look at the questions down in the description. Benedict Arnold was truly a great military commander during the American Revolution, but is primarily remembered as being a traitor to the American cause when in 1780 he defected or went over to join the British side in the war. But before we get to his treason, let's take a look at Arnold's background. Benedict Arnold was born on January 14, 1741 in Norwich, Connecticut. His father was a wealthy businessman, which allowed Benedict to go to private school. However, by the age of 14, Benedict's father had fallen on hard times, and so Benedict Arnold left school and became an apprentice to an apothecary. An apothecary was basically a pharmacist. And so in the mid-1750s, the French and Indian War erupted in North America. So at the age of 16 in 1757, Benedict volunteered to fight in the war. However, the Connecticut volunteer regiment that he joined basically disbanded within 2 weeks, and so Benedict never did see any action during the French and Indian War. Arnold continued his apprenticeship as an apothecary, and in 1762 he established his own apothecary and bookseller business in New Haven, Connecticut. A few years later, he established an overseas trading company. The business did very well, but began to be burdened by British regulations and taxes that again began to appear throughout the 1760s. Arnold was so upset about these British regulations that he joined the Sons of Liberty in an effort to fight back against British taxation. A few years later, in 1767, Arnold married Margaret Mansfield in New Haven, and together they had 3 sons. With the first shots at Lexington and Concord in 1775, Arnold saw an opportunity. He had always been, someone that viewed himself as being better than others, or, I guess you could say he had a big ego. And so in Arnold's eyes, the revolution would offer him the opportunity to prove his valor or really make a name for himself. And so as soon as the first shots were fired, he headed to Boston to join in the American cause, and he brought with him a plan to capture the British fort in northern New York at Fort Ticonderoga. And to find out more about the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, check out my other video on it. But Arnold was successful in capturing the fort. However, he did not get the credit. Instead, militia leader Ethan Allen did. And this would be a reoccurring theme for Arnold over the next few years. Arnold then had an argument with other commanders and resigned from the army. To add to it, on his return from Fort Ticonderoga, he received word that his wife Margaret had died. And so after this, Arnold rejoined the army and led troops to attack Quebec City in Canada. The campaign was a failure, but George Washington was impressed with Arnold's leadership. Then Arnold was tasked with defending Lake Champlain from British advances. He was able to do so, but ended up basically losing all of the American naval vessels on Lake Champlain. And so for this, the Continental Congress really questioned Arnold's command. But when General John Burgoyne's British Army was stalled just north of Saratoga in September of 1777, General George Washington dispatched Arnold to join with the Northern Department of the Continental Army and stop the British altogether. At the Battle of Saratoga, Arnold led Americans into battle and was shot in the leg. The Americans were victorious, but instead of Arnold getting the credit, American General Horatio Gates got all of the glory for the victory. After recovering from his wounds, Arnold rejoined the Continental Army in May of 1778 at Valley Forge. Shortly after, the British withdrew from Philadelphia, and George Washington appointed Arnold the military governor of the city of Philadelphia. Now, it was while here in Philadelphia that Arnold fell in love with Peggy Shippen, and the two were married. Now, Arnold was 38 years old, and Peggy was only 18. But Peggy was a loyalist, and Benedict would share with her his anger over not getting credit or recognition for his military efforts. And soon Peggy began to convince Benedict to start sharing information with the British. And so by 1779, Arnold was passing information on Continental troop positions to British commander John Andre. Shortly after this, Arnold was given command of the fort at West Point on the Hudson River in New York, which of course would later be where the famous military academy would be built. But Arnold began to send communications to John Andre offering to turn over the fort at West Point to the British. As it turns out, John Andre got captured by American militiamen, and on him they found these letters from Benedict Arnold describing this plot. The letters were sent to George Washington, who was absolutely shocked by the betrayal. Washington had Andre executed as a spy and then put out orders to capture and execute Benedict Arnold. Arnold and Peggy fled and they crossed over the British lines, and Arnold ended up joining the British Army. And he actually commanded British troops during Cornwallis's Carolina campaigns and then, of course, eventual surrender at Yorktown. However, even in the British Army, Arnold was again passed over for commands as the British didn't know if they could trust him either. And so as the war came to an end in 1781, Benedict and Peggy fled to England. Benedict Arnold would die on June 14, 1801 at the age of 60 in London. Although Benedict Arnold wished to make a name for himself as a hero of the American Revolution, he instead made a name for himself as one of the most famous traitors in American history. So with that, hopefully you learned something, and thanks for watching.